Well, good morning, Tekoa Church. My name is Pastor Austin, the lead pastor here at Tekoa. If we haven't met, I would love to meet you after service in our coffee lounge. But I'm excited that we're here this week. We're in this series called Dark Horses. We're looking at people that weren't expected to succeed. That's what a dark horse is, an animal or a person that's not expected to succeed, but that comes from behind and succeeds or wins in the race. And there are so many people throughout the pages and the stories of the Bible that were these types of people that came from behind. They weren't expected to win, but God entered their life and God used them and they made an impact because of it. And I think this is something that we can relate to. I often don't consider myself at the head of the race, but I also know that because God is on my side, He does amazing things through me. And there is more to come, and I believe the same for you. Whether you feel like you're extraordinary or not, maybe you feel ordinary. That's what we talked about last week, how God used an ordinary guy to make a difference just by giving God his yes. And this week, as I was prepping for this message, and even as I'm prepping for Easter, which is coming, a huge day for our church, it was daylight savings last Sunday, and I did some travel last week, and I just felt like, you know what, I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off on getting up early. Like, I'm already going to be tired. I have a brand new baby in my house. It doesn't matter how, I'm not going to be able to get enough sleep. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to get up early. And as I got up and enjoyed my nice cup of coffee in the few minutes of solitude that our house has before the kids get up and everybody's running around and it's just a day of craziness. That's good, but that silence is also golden there in the morning. And as I have been praying, what I've been observing as well in our world and what I love to pray into is, what does our city, our world, our church need? What are we going through? What are we facing right now? And one of the big words that has come up for me is uncertainty. COVID uncertainty has not gone away. What happens this summer or next school year or even next week is unsure. What happens in the war that's going on in Europe right now and globally, even as a result of that, is uncertainty. More have already died on both sides of that conflict than did in the entire Middle East with the Iraq and Afghanistani wars. There's a lot going on in our world right now. Inflation is real. Supply shortages haven't gone away in the last 2 years, but have gotten worse. The future of economics for our country, maybe for you and your family, has possibly a high degree of uncertainty. And I continue, even for me, I lead a startup church, and things are going well. The church is so grateful to be here, but it's a startup, right? Startups always have a degree of uncertainty to them. I'm not sure what your work situation is like, your family situation is like, or just the world situation you're in. You know, our family just grew. We're a family of 4. It's great, but there's some uncertainty of figuring out what does that look like for us. Maybe it's housing, a relationship, school. I want to acknowledge all of that, and I want to tell you as your pastor, I see that's what we're going through as I talk with people, as I observe our world. And everyone's situation is different. Maybe some of you even feel like life is great right now. It's better than it's been in a really long time. And I want to celebrate with you if that is your situation. But for so many, uncertainty is a big part of life right now. And actually, as we and our team has been prepping for Easter, we feel like this is our Easter message: hope in the uncertainty. I'm excited for that and what's going to take place here at Tekoa and in our community as we lead into this. But as I've been praying this week, I felt like, you know what? We're not going to wait till Easter to address this, right? Like, I had this big setup. It's not like, okay, wait 5 weeks and you get the answer. But we're going to weave this into our Dark Horses series because I think for so many of the people and the dark horses that we look at in the Bible as well, there is a high degree of uncertainty in their lives as well. And there is something that God offers to us when we follow Him. There is hope in the uncertainty. There is peace in the uncertainty, clarity in uncertainty. In church, we have a purpose right here, right now, in this world. And if you are feeling uncertainty right now, we have good news for you today. God has good news for you today. There is hope in the uncertainty. My message today is called Get Started. It's a pretty simple title, and we're going to look at the life of Moses in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus. And too often, uncertainty paralyzes us. And what we need to do often is just get started. God comes in and maybe doesn't share the finish line with us or the whole path to get there, but he tells us to move forward. And if we don't move, there's no way we can get to the finish line. We need to give him our yes at the beginning and yes along the way. We even talked some about that last week. But oftentimes what we need to do in life is just get started, get moving. And I'm going to come back to this, but if we don't ever get started, there is no hope of us finishing. There is a 0% chance of finishing if you don't get started. It's not possible. And I'm seeing, even as we are 2 years into COVID life, there are so many people that are still stuck in neutral. So many people that have this COVID fatigue, maybe literally from the virus or just from 2 years of what's been going on in the world. Maybe you're just tired from life right now. I have a 5-week-old, so I'm tired right now. I don't know about you. But are you moving forward? Do you feel like life is different, or do you feel like, it's the same? I was talking to a guy in my neighborhood who was having his birthday, and he was all worried because he thought he was turning 58. And he was talking to his son, and his son is like, "But when were you born?" And I don't know what the math works out to be, but the son said, "I know the math, Dad, that doesn't work out. You're turning 59. And he's all upset because he thought he missed this year of his life. Now, literally, he didn't miss it. Obviously, he's been alive for 59 years. But I think for some of us, that's what COVID even has felt like. We missed a whole year of life, and it just passed us by. I don't know if you felt stuck, but I don't know what God is calling you to do. But today I want to encourage you, get started. By the choices you make, the life you are living, what is the declaration of Jesus that you are making with your life? Who is he asking you to say he is? And are you making conscious choices, or are you making choices or a choice by doing nothing, by staying comfortable and relaxed? So many people are paralyzed always, but especially right now, by fear. They don't want life to change. They're more comfortable in a world that said it was okay to be afraid, it's okay to just stay home all the time, and there's a time and a place for that. I'm not knocking on that, but that's not our whole lives. We can't stay there forever. People that are afraid of the virus, afraid of economics, afraid of politics, afraid of everything going on around them. And it's still present. It doesn't mean it goes away. But the question is, today, are you living by faith, or are you living by fear in your life? And deeper in that, are you living a life of faith and trust of God so that you can see him move and you can live a life that matters and has meaning and purpose? Or are you living just in fear? And you're just trying to get to the finish line of life and just hope that you'll make it there and somehow life worked out and it was good? Are you living by faith, or just to exist in life? Every choice we make matters. And here is where our story is set. We are set today, I said, with the story of Moses. We're set in Egypt, right? Modern day Egypt, ancient Egypt was in the same place, had the same name even. And the Israelites are the great-great-great-grandchildren, some number of greats, from Isaac, who we looked at last week. Now, Isaac got a promise that he inherited from his father Abraham, and then the Israelites here, the great-great-great-grandchildren, they inherited the same promise from Abraham and Isaac that God gave to their people. A promise that their people would get two things. Number one, they would get a land in the Middle East near where modern-day Israel is, and number two, that they would have descendants that were more numerous than the stars in the sky. So this is the setting, but they're in Egypt now. We skipped over how they got there, but they're in Egypt, and part of it is working out, part of it is not. Obviously, they don't have the land yet. They're in Egypt, but they are multiplying. Matter of fact, they're multiplying so much, and they are doing so well in Egypt that Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, is worried about them. He's worried because they now outnumber the native Egyptians. God is blessing this people so much. And so in Exodus 1, verse 11, it says, "So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with their crushing labor." This didn't stop them, though. God had more for them. They had the blessing of God on their life. So despite the brutal oppression over them, Pharaoh tries to institute another order. He basically tries to commit genocide over the Israelite people and says, every boy that is born of them we're going to kill, every female will let live. And it says in verse 17, but because the midwives feared God over Pharaoh, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So Pharaoh is getting frustrated now. It's not working. His plans are not working. He feels like if this people rises up, we are in trouble. And so he goes further. He says, I'm going to actually take this to the next level. And he gives the order to all his people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. It's a sad order. It's very unfortunate. But God was not done with his plan for this people, and he does not abandon his people. He did not abandon the promise that he made for them. And here, in this context, is where Moses enters the story. And before we get to Moses, I actually want to give some credit to his mother, because his mother teaches us the same principle that Moses is going to teach us from his life today. See, he's born into this bad situation. His people are oppressed as slaves. They aren't living out yet their promise fully from God, and Pharaoh is taking action against them. Moses, though, is a baby. He can't do anything, but his mother can. She is the initial hero, the initial dark horse in this story. She has no special qualifications. She has no special skills. But what is special about her is she gets started on faith and trusts God to take her and take care of her family. She doesn't do nothing. She moves and trusts God with the outcome. She just takes the first step. She has a baby boy named Moses, and she decides, I am going to hide this baby from everybody else because I love him and I want to pray for his safety. And so she hides the baby Moses, for 3 months. Now, I don't know how she hides him for 3 months. I just said I have a newborn baby, and I can tell you that baby is going to wake the whole village at various times. I don't know how you hide him for 3 months, but somehow she does. She hides him for 3 months, and then probably with a bunch of prayer, she takes the next step. But she took that first one, right? She got started. She says, I'm going to hide him. Probably if she gets found out, it's her and her whole family. Right? Pharaoh's going to make an example of them if he finds out. But she gets started. She says, I'm going to hide him. I'm going to do everything that I can and trust God for the rest. So she does. And then it says in verse 3 of chapter 2, when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket, laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. And I've read this story so many times. I've heard this story. I've seen this story in movies. You might have as well. It's a famous story. And I usually picture this basket gently floating down this peaceful river and like meandering into some reeds and getting stuck, and God like floating it over there. And it's this pretty picture in the middle of this really dark time for this people. But I feel like as I was reading this today, like Moses' mom had faith. Moses' sister, as we're going to see in a moment, had faith. And they took that step of faith out. See, it says Moses' mom put the basket in the reeds. She had 3 months to plan, and so she had a plan. And God gave her this plan. Like, put it there. I think it was very strategic where she put it. It wouldn't float down the river. And hopefully somebody would find it. But then Moses' mom had a plan. It says, the baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. It wasn't an overnight plan. She had been planning. I'm going to send my daughter to watch over the baby. If nobody finds the baby, then we can get him out and come up with another plan. But strategically, he was placed there by the mom, and so was the sister, because then it says in verse 7, then the baby's sister, it doesn't say this yet in verse 7. I'm getting ahead of myself. The princess of Pharaoh comes and bathes there with her people. So this was the spot that Moses' mom picked. I'm sure it was a normal spot for the princess to go. She hears probably the baby crying. She's a princess, so she doesn't go, but she sends her people over to get the basket, finds the baby in the basket, and says, let's do something about this. I don't want this baby to die. She recognizes that it's a Hebrew baby. She recognizes that her dad said all the babies are supposed to be killed, but she says, I got a different plan. And then on faith, Moses' sister comes forward. She's strategically placed there, probably nervous, shaking, like my mom sent me here, but if anybody finds out our plan and what we're trying to do, it's not going to end well for our whole family. And it says in verse 7, the baby sister approached the princess, "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called who? The baby's mother. The big plan working itself out. Call the baby's mother and let the mother raise her own child at the request of the princess of Egypt. And later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. Talk about uncertainty. Talk about a time of trial and difficulty for his people. Talk about stepping out in faith for these people. And Moses' mom says, "I'm going to do all I can to save baby Moses. I'm going to trust God with the rest. I'm going to do my part, and I'm going to trust God with the rest." She gets found out. The family gets found out. I'm sure it is the end for all of them. It's a serious situation. But what did it take? It took Moses' mom saying, "I'm going to get started, I'm going to try, and I'm going to trust the rest to God." And Prince Moses gets raised as a prince and not as a slave in the Pharaoh's household. And it's the start of God working out his plan to save his people. And there's an important point here, right? We need to start where we are. Use what we have, do what we can, and trust God with everything else along the way, because if we don't get started, we are never going to finish. If we don't get started, we are never going to finish. Prince Moses grows up in this situation, and he's got a choice to make as he gets older. He's confronted with injustice, and he has to choose what to do. And we're going to see in a minute, I don't think he makes the best choice, but he tries. And God uses that and works with him. Because we see in verse 11 and 12, it says, "Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of the fellow Hebrews. And after looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand." Moses, again, I don't think he probably made the right choice here, but he makes a choice that God is going to use. He renounces being royal and his identity as a prince to identify with his people as the Israelites, the slaves. There is a high material cost for him. There is a high risk for him that we're going to see played out. But he takes this step. We don't know if he was angry and rage over the injustice or what caused him to do it, but he takes this initial step and he defends his people. But he messed it up a little bit, I think, in how he took justice into his own hands, and he commits murder, and so he has to run and flee because he gets found out and Pharaoh is after him. What's important, though, is he takes the first step. And what we see is that God will redeem his life later, despite him taking maybe a misstep as his first step. And God will invite him to retake another step and get started again in life. But he had to choose. The start was running away from him. He wasn't completely ready for what God had for him in his life, and God was going to use this. He ran away to be an Israelite. He ran away, and it was step one of God's plan for him and the purpose he was going to use for him. And so often for us, we're in the same boat. We just need to take that first step, and then God can use it to do more. Because Moses goes from a slave to a courtly upbringing. Lessons, I'm sure, in leadership, lessons he's going to use as he goes back to talk with Pharaoh later, as he sees the inner workings of the palace. But he needed to learn more. He wasn't ready for what God had for him. And I can't tell you how many times I talk to people and they just want to know the end. Right? Like Moses had an end. Moses' mom didn't know it. Moses didn't know it. But he was going to be one of the greatest leaders of all time. And God was going to use him to set his people free in Egypt, but he wasn't ready for it. Like if as a teenager, God said to Moses, "You will be a prince for a while, then you're going to commit murder, then you're going to run away and become a shepherd. Then many years later, I'm going to invite you to come back. You're going to do crazy miracles. You're going to become the leader of all the Israelites. You will lead them across a raging river that will become dry, and then when the Egyptians try to follow you, the river is going to come back and drown them. I'm going to provide miraculously for my people. I'm going to teach you the laws for the people, the first 10 of which will become the founding principles of many nations the world over. And I'm going to provide miraculously for your people day by day for years with a food that doesn't even exist yet, that we don't know what to call, so we're going to just call it manna, which literally means what is it? And I have all of these plans for you. Moses would probably have run even further. He would have disappeared from God's plan. Either that or he would have hid in the courtly, nice pleasures of being a prince. And said, that sounds amazing, God, but that's crazy. Like, I can't do that. He would have run or he would have hid, and whatever you think, I'm sure you would have done the same, whether you think so or not. He wasn't ready for it. And if God did that, he would have run or he would have hid. And I think for us, it's the same way. We see this, whether it's a Christian or not, we see this. I think of somebody that gets thrust into a position that they didn't know they were ready for, but then when it comes, they're ready for it, and they do crazy things, and they provide for their people. You think that Zelensky right now in Ukraine, not saying, don't read more into this than what I'm trying to say right now, but do you think he would have taken the role of the Ukrainian president if he knew it was going to happen? No. He would have ran out of the country as fast as he could many years ago and let somebody else handle it. But you have to rise to the occasion of where you're at. You think a parent that knows that they're going to have a child with Down syndrome would say, sign me up for that if given the choice. One of my friends is in that situation, and he's so grateful now for who his son is and what he has done for his family and friends and the world around, and their son is not even 10 years old yet. God had a plan, and God was with them, and there's a joy and a purpose for them that is greater than they could have handled and could have known at the beginning, but God is with them, and he is with us. Do you think, for me right now, I would have chosen 2020 to start a church? Not if I was given the choice. I would have stayed in my job for another 5 years that was comfortable and had a steady paycheck and said, I'll stay here for 5 years, and then we'll think about starting a church. God knew, though. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he knew right now, during this time, maybe it's you. But this city, this people needed a church right now, not in 5 years. And Tekoa is here as a result, and God has been faithful along the way, and if I could go back, I wouldn't change it. At the time, I would not have made the choice, but if I went back, I couldn't change it. And I don't know what you hope for your future, what God maybe even is calling you to start. You might not know the finish line, but where are you going to start? Because I know this, I know that when we follow God, he is a good God, and he has good things in store for you, and it might be challenging, it might be crazy, but he's got bigger things in store for you than even you could think of right now. So just get started, and he will use you and use your life, and you are going to be fulfilled from following him. You are going to be fulfilled from following him. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Trust in God and follow him in all that you do, because you are never going to finish something you don't start. So then we see God is not done with Moses. In Exodus 3, I'm not going to read all these verses, but if you want to follow along, I'm in Exodus 3 for the last part of my message here. And it says, 40 years go by, basically a long time goes by. Out in the wilderness, Moses is shepherding sheep. He becomes a shepherd, from slave to prince to shepherd. And this is where he's at. And in the middle of being a shepherd, he sees this bush burning, and it's God getting his attention, and God speaks to him out of this burning bush that doesn't get consumed by the fire. And God says to Moses, hold on a second, it's time for you to go. He says, you're going to go back and talk to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And Moses says, wait a minute, God, who am I to do this? And God says, actually, you're going to go back to Egypt, and you're going to talk to Pharaoh, and you're going to say, excuse me, it's time to let my people go. The Israelites are not your people, Egyptians. They are God's people, and it's time to let us go. We're going to leave. And if you don't know this, Pharaoh, that's the entire labor force of Egypt. Your economy is going to be crushed. You're not going to know what to do, but God said it, so just let my people go. And Moses is like, God, I don't know about this. And here's my point that I'm going to get to here. We need to simply start where we are. Start where we are. Moses just needed to give God the yes of, I'm going to go back. God and Moses are talking here, and remember, God just told him, you're going to go back and talk to Pharaoh, and Moses says, hold on a second. He objects again. He says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelite people out of Egypt? What are you thinking, God? I killed an Egyptian a long time ago, and I'm just sure of it. The wanted posters are still up. I grew up in Pharaoh's household. He recognizes me. If I go up to him, I'm not going to be some random dude. He's going to know, and he is going to have me arrested. But God says something. He says, I will be with you. And there's something that happens, right, when we get somebody with us. And something can change when somebody is with us. It's a little bit like when I was at the airport recently and I was seeing, have you seen the different lines? There's the regular line, and then there's the TSA pre-check line. You get to go a little bit faster. And then there's the clear line or whatever it is. And I'm usually in the middle line, and I'm looking at that one, and it looks great. And if you notice, especially the first time, these people get escorted through security, and then they don't have to take off their shoes and their belt and their jacket and the fluids out of their bag, and they just have to go right on through. Why? Because of who's with them. Because they're escorted by that person. And something happens when God is with you. We get to do things that we could never otherwise do. There's a confidence that comes. They would never have that confidence to do all those things, right? You wouldn't just try to walk through security in the general line. They would look at you start yelling at you, right? Pull you aside, you're getting the random check, dude, because you tried to go through. No, there's a confidence when we know who is with us, and it lets us do things we would never do otherwise. And God has got something he wants to do in you, something he wants to do through you. And we need to start where we are. It doesn't matter where you are when you know who you're with. And the next thing, if you're taking notes, is you're going to need to use what you have. Despite God saying, I'm with you, Moses still continues to object time after time. And God's like, it's time to go to Egypt. And Moses is like, I don't know about that. And God's like, I want you to go to Egypt. And Moses says to God, what if they don't believe or don't listen to me? And they say, the Lord didn't appear to you. Great, you're crazy. You had a little vision in your head. You're crazy, Moses. And so the Lord says to him, what is in your hand? A staff, Moses replies. I have a staff. Don't miss the power in this. Why was it a staff? It's not a magical staff. It's power because that's what Moses had because he was a shepherd. God will use what you have, what is in your hands. He had a staff because he had a shepherd. It wasn't special in and of itself, but God begins to work a miracle and something special because of what Moses had, and he was being used. He says, throw it on the ground, and it will turn into a snake, and then pick it back up, and it'll turn back into a staff, and this will be a sign to my people. God takes the ordinary and makes it extraordinary, and he works in the life of Moses, and he will work in your life as well. And it's unbelievable what happens when we step out in faith. We take the thing that seems ordinary, and God takes it and makes it extraordinary. God says, what do you have? Whatever you have, I will take it and I will use it. Whatever you have, wherever you are at. What do you have in your hand? We all have something. If you say, all I can do is cook, I can make a mean pasta, and that's it, great. God will use it. I've seen it. Seen him use people that can cook and take a meal to a family that is in need, that maybe just had surgery or, just had a baby. That happened to us. We've done it to other people. You can cook, God can use you. You say, well, I love to run. I got a pair of running shoes, but I don't know how God can use that. Well, I've seen him start groups from that and seeing people recognize from that, hey, this person that leads this running group is a little bit different. There's something in their life, and I got an invite now to church because of it. God can use whatever is in your life, and it's unbelievable when we step out in faith and take the thing that seems ordinary in our life, and we step out and get started, what God will take that and use it and do in you and through you. Maybe you like hanging out with kids. Great. We have a Tekoa Kids team upstairs that does that each and every week and pours into kids' lives so that they can be raised up to know who God is, to know what their purpose is and how they can live it out and know the love of God that they could see no other ways. You need to start where you're at. Can you get out of debt today? Probably not. But you could not buy that thing you were going to buy and you could make a payment. Can you fix your marriage today? Probably not. Not in one day. But you could choose to love your spouse when you don't know if they're going to love you back and make that first step. Sometimes we are so afraid of step 1, like we're excited about step 100, but we're so afraid of step 29 and all the other steps in between that we think we can never get there. What you might not know is you're never getting there. You don't even have to go through step 29. By the time you get to step 28, God's got another plan, but you just need to get started down the path so that God can work out in your life. You're not even ready for what God has for you, just as Moses wasn't ready for what God had for him, but God took him step by step along the way, and by the time Moses got there, he was ready, and he got to do incredible things with his life. And what you'll find when you walk in step with God, and you start where you are, you use what you have, you do what you can, God takes this journey. Whatever journey you're on, you think you're on, and maybe it's to go a certain way, and he does something far more extraordinary than you could ever imagine on your own. That little ordinary journey you were on becomes extraordinary. And this is what it takes. It takes just getting started. You are going to remember that. I have said it so many times, I'm going to keep saying it. You're going to remember it when you leave here today, and I hope God is stirring something in your heart as I say that time after time again. That thing that you keep thinking, maybe it's that, but I don't really want it to be that. As I keep saying it, I hope God stirs in your heart, whatever that is, that you would get started following God in faith as Moses' mom did, as Moses' sister did, as Moses did. They got started, and then God used it. And I talk to people all the time, and they want to know what's going to happen. I remember talking to somebody that was 19, thinking about what do I do for college, and they wanted to know their whole life plan. And they're like, I think I want to be a surgeon and make a ton of money, and that's my path. They're like, if I do, like, where do I go to college? What do I study? And then where do I go to grad school? And where do I go to medical school? And where do I go? And then where do I get my residency and hospital? And, like, trying to plan out their whole life. And I talk to people like that. I don't know what is on your mind, if it's medical school or if it's just getting started with a group in your community, whatever it is. But I talked to that guy, and I was like, what if God told you what was down the road 15 years from now? What if he said it's for you to become a doctor in Southeast Asia and help people that are trapped in the slave trade right now and provide medical care for them and make a difference with your life? I said, are you ready for that? He said, no, I'm not ready for that. I would not go down this path if that was what was in store for me. And I said, it might be what's in store for you. It's probably not what's in store for you. But if that is what's in store for you, it's going to be better than anything you could come up with. And you'll be ready for it by the time you get there. I said, just get started. Go to school, study biology or whatever you're going to study, and by the time you graduate from college, see what's next. God will have the next step for you by the time you get there. And this is what I know and I've seen time and time again. By the time you get there, you get to step 28 or whatever it is in your journey, two things will have happened. Number one, new opportunities are going to arisen that you didn't and could have never known were possible, just as they were for Moses. By the time he was a shepherd, there were new things that were on the horizon for him that weren't possible before. But there are new things that will be possible that you never thought of before, and they will be better and give you more purpose and fulfillment and joy than what you are dreaming of right now. Those people that don't get to experience that are the ones that never get started. And the second thing is, your faith is going to be strong enough for you to take those opportunities where before you would have run and hid or run away in fear. What is God calling you to start today? Maybe you need to start small, coming to a small group, and you're afraid of going to somebody's home, or you're afraid to come here for one of our groups during the week. But by the end of a couple months, you're going to be sad when it ends. You just need to get started and take that first step, and God will work out the rest. Maybe he's calling you to take the first step to heal your marriage and serve and love your spouse. Maybe it's to go to a new school. Maybe it's to pursue that hobby. Maybe it's to start serving or tithing. Maybe it's to start getting involved in our homeless outreach and you're afraid and you don't know what to do, but you sign up to serve food one Saturday. Maybe it's time to get a new job. I remember my first job in San Jose, and I had a dishonest boss, and I felt like ethically I can't do this job anymore. And by stepping out in faith, God did more that year than I've ever seen him do before, but I had to step out in faith. Starting is often the hardest part. Sticking with it is important too, but if you don't start, you have a 0% chance of finishing. So today, what is on your mind? What does God put on your mind? What have you come with on your mind? Maybe you aren't 20 and free and you're like, I feel 40 and the weight of kids and responsibility on my life, and you're thinking, Pastor, I wish I heard this 20 years ago. But the Israelites had family and kids. Some of them had experienced loss. Some of them were single. Some of them were old. Some of them were young. Some of them had huge families. They were every sort of circumstance, and God provided for them. He set them free from Egypt, and they walked out of that land. Because everybody has something in their life that God has said, I want you to get started. What is it? Maybe for you, it's time to get fit and healthy. Maybe it's time to start that business, even in the middle of COVID. Maybe it's time to have a restoration of that relationship. Maybe it's for you, I'm going to be more generous with my time, or just a generous person in general. Maybe it's getting into a group here at Tekoa for the first time. Maybe it's staying after service for our 10-minute hang out in the coffee lounge, and it's uncomfortable for you to be around a bunch of people without masks on, but you're going to do it and be uncomfortable. I don't know what God is calling you to get started. Maybe it's time for you to stop being a slave to your schedule and make a difference in people's lives around you. What is it that you simply need to get started with? Don't get stuck in the roundabout of indecision where you don't know where the exit is. At the end of Moses' life, I'm going to skip over this because of time, but in Hebrews 11, he makes it into the Hall of Fame. It literally gets called a man of faith. And Moses' life ended there in the Hall of Fame of Scripture. And maybe you feel like, oh, I can't really identify with him. I'm never going to be in the Hall of Fame of Scripture. But Moses' life didn't start there. It started as a slave. And then he became a murderer and fled. And God still used him because he got started once again and said, I'll go in faith. So God is going to take what is ordinary in your life, and he's going to do something extraordinary. Stop worrying about step 29. Don't worry about it. Just take one step by step. And when you get there, God will teach you what to say and what to do as he did for Moses. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. And when you do this, God will make a difference in your life, and something extraordinary will happen. You can look at your situation, and when you think God may be calling you to do, and you can maybe be overwhelmed. Mother Teresa said it this way: if you can't feed 100 people, feed one. Just feed one. In other words, just get started. Do something. Somebody else is still on the couch. And if you get off the couch and get moving, you are going to finish that race way before that other person. Stop worrying about being the fastest on the track. Just get off the couch and start moving. Get started. Use what you have. Do what you can do, because you are never going to finish what you haven't started. Would you pray with me right now that God would give you the strength to get started with what you need to get started, or clarity for what you need to get clarity? God, I pray right now that our church, everybody listening to this, would have the encouragement to take that first step. Faith to step out, or maybe even to step back, God, and trust you. Trust that you have something in store for them, and maybe just get the clarity of what it is that they need to do. And then that strength, that faith to step out. God, give us faith right now to take steps forward. Give us courage to step forward even when times are uncertain. Give us clarity to step forward when things are uncertain and unclear. And Lord, I pray for the community around to give encouragement and support and help, Lord, as your church should be for people. And God, may we have the strength, the courage, the fortitude to step forward, not wait for the future, but take that step to get started in whatever it is you are calling us for. As we continue praying together today, there's others of us here who have never taken that very first step to get started. And that very first step is to get started with a relationship with Jesus. Everything else we talked about is for nothing if we don't have that. At the end of Moses' life, he knew it was all worth it because he had a relationship with God that was eternal. Everything he went through was 100% worth it. And God is saying to you today that no matter what you've done, no matter your past, Moses knew this. He wasn't perfect. But God still used him. No matter your past, we all have sin. God says if you come to him, he will heal you. He says, if you come to me, I will heal you. He says, I sent my son Jesus to live a life for you, and if you believe in him, trust that he died for you and rose again. I will give you new life. I will give you hope. I will give you freedom in this life. So I want to invite everybody to pray this with me right now if you feel led, and if you want to make that choice to follow Jesus, to follow God for the very first time, pray these words with me. Or recommit to following him if you've been following him for a long time. Jesus, I believe in you. I know that I'm not perfect, but I choose to follow you. Thank you for dying for me and rising to new life. I choose to live my life for you. I pray that you would come into my life now, Lord. Amen. Amen. We've got one more song this morning to sing together. Before we do, I want to invite you to do a few things during this song. I invite you to think about, what is God calling you to get started? Let these words, even of this song, sink into your heart. The song is called Egypt, and it is a reflection for us today out of what he did for all the Israelites who he set free from their slavery in Egypt. So let this become your prayer. The beginning of the song, you can spend some time even reflecting, and then Tim is going to invite us all to worship God together, and let this be the declaration that we would worship him. But as we continue worshiping, spend some time praying about what God is calling you to get started, and then make a commitment to take that step of faith. You can also take this time to continue your worship as we worship together by giving back to God with your tithes and offerings. This is something we do each week as a community, as a church, to trust God. He has blessed us, and so we trust him with our finances. You can do that online or in the boxes by the doors now or on your way out. But spend some time reflecting, spend some time worshiping God together. Don't just leave here today unaffected by what God has done, but use this time right now to worship him together